Hey guys, tonight we drift far from the noise of modern life. No glowing screens, no restless traffic. Just the faint shimmer of gold dust hanging in the air above Timbuktu at dusk. The horizon looks tired, the color of a soft bruise, and somewhere between the dry wind and the hum of evening insects, you can almost hear the rustle of leather pouches filled with treasure. The streets are quiet, not because people are poor, but because everyone already knows exactly what their wealth weighs, down to the smallest grain. This is the Mali Empire in its golden calm, and you somehow have wandered right into it. You walk slowly, because that's the only speed that makes sense here. Every step stirs up a faint cloud of powdery gold dust. Yes, actual gold dust that glints and drifts in the sunset like pollen. It's beautiful, a little absurd, and slightly terrifying when you remember how much it's worth. You probably won't survive this if you try to inhale it, but you'll die rich at least. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're tuning in from somewhere quiet tonight, tell me where you are and what time it is down in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself among low clay buildings the color of toasted almonds. The air smells faintly of dust and date syrup. Around you, people move with unhurried grace. Traders in long indigo robes, scholars carrying scrolls, children carrying nothing but the sunset's glow on their faces. Everyone seems to know their place in a rhythm that's older than coins. Historians still argue whether Timbuktu's peace was born from wealth or discipline. Some say gold simply made people too comfortable to fight. Others believe the empire's power came from how it handled measurement, because in Mali everything valuable was counted, weighed, or sung about. Even friendship had its balance. Even stories had their scales. A man sits cross-legged on a mat near the market's edge. Before him is a wooden tray dusted in real gold, not the fake Instagram kind. He's not selling it. He's counting it. He pinches a bit between two fingers, lets it fall in a slow glittering stream onto a small copper scale, nods, then writes something down with a reed pen. You watch him repeat the motion again and again, until the act feels like prayer. You think of your own hurried world, credit cards, contactless taps, digital balances, and realize how far it's drifted from the tactile intimacy of wealth you can weigh with your own hand. One mainstream historical fact: Timbuktu was a true economic hub, connecting West Africa's goldfields to North Africa's salt caravans and Mediterranean markets. It wasn't just rich, it was methodically rich. Mali's merchants understood that peace required precision. They didn't hoard wealth so much as regulate its flow. Their calm was mathematical. A quirky tidbit you might enjoy. Some traders supposedly used hollow bird bones to store gold dust, blowing it gently out when paying for goods. Imagine paying for a loaf of bread by puffing a tiny cloud of treasure into someone's palm. It sounds whimsical, but in a way, it was practical. Less risk of spilling, more control in the desert wind. You wander past stalls of copper jewelry and indigo dye. Each transaction as slow as breathing. Nobody shouts prices. Instead, they murmur. Even bargaining here feels like meditation. The buyer lowers his head. The seller weighs the silence. Eventually, someone nods. A pouch changes hands, and peace continues uninterrupted. Gold dust, it turns out, is too light for anger. Raise your voice and you risk losing your fortune to the breeze. Maybe that's why this empire lasted as long as it did, because arguments literally weren't worth the air they stirred. You pause at a well in the town center, where camels kneel in the sand like tired ships. One drinks so slowly, you feel drowsy just watching it. A merchant beside you murmurs something about measured thirst, and though you don't quite understand the language, you grasp the mood. Even the animals here seem patient. Far away beyond the dunes, gold caravans crawl toward the city like strings of ants. They carry the empire's lifeblood, but no one panics or rushes. The counters will be ready when the gold arrives. They always are. Night begins to settle over Timbuktu now. Purple at the edges, honey in the center. You follow the scent of cooking millet, the laughter of traders unwinding after a long day of weighing and measuring the world. For a moment, it feels as if time itself has slowed to match their rhythm. Somewhere in that pause, you realize the deeper truth of this empire, that peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the mastery of balance. Every grain of gold, every grain of sand, every heartbeat counted with equal care. You find a quiet corner near the edge of the market and sit. The last light fades, and for a few heartbeats, you imagine the gold dust settling over your skin like a blessing. Somewhere nearby, a child hums a soft tune that sounds like arithmetic put to music. The city exhales. So do you. The work of the gold counters will begin again at dawn, as it always has. But for now, Mali sleeps, peaceful, glittering, measured. Morning creeps into Timbuktu like a secret that refuses to hurry. The sky starts pale, almost silver, before deepening into that particular kind of desert blue that makes everything look freshly invented. You wake to the quiet rhythm of brooms sweeping dust from courtyards, soft, circular sounds that might as well be the empire's heartbeat. You're surrounded by a city that doesn't rush to meet the day. The air is still cool, the sun not yet harsh enough to remind everyone how serious life can get. Traders are already arranging their scales, their fingers steady, their movements deliberate. It's not greed that drives them. It's something gentler, like devotion, to the act of keeping things in balance. This is the Mali Empire at its administrative peak, a web of gold roots and steady governance stretching from the Atlantic to the edge of the Sahara. You're in the middle of what historians now call one of the most prosperous, peacefully managed states in medieval history. Taxes are collected without bloodshed. Trade routes stay open for decades, and gold moves through the land like a slow river of light. The empire's officials, known for their composure and quiet efficiency, record everything. From a merchant's debt to a camel's birth, nothing escapes their ledgers. You might expect chaos from so much wealth, but instead, there's serenity. Mali's wealth isn't stored in vaults or guarded by armies. It's contained in trust, precision, and an almost spiritual respect for measurement. You walk into a small courtyard near the governor's house. There's no shouting, no clanging swords, just a circle of accountants sitting beneath a canopy of woven reeds. Each man holds a wooden board covered in lines and symbols. A clerk dips a reed pen into ink made from soot and gum, and you can almost hear the scratch of history being written in real time. Historians still argue whether this bureaucratic calm came from cultural genius or simple necessity. Some claim Mali's peace was engineered by its rulers to protect the gold trade. Others believe it emerged naturally from the desert's rhythm. Too hot to fight, too vast to control, so people learned to cooperate instead. Whatever the reason, the result was the same. An empire whose power rested not in conquest, but in calm arithmetic. A mainstream historical fact slips quietly into view. By the early 14th century, Mali controlled roughly half of the world's known gold supply. Imagine that, half of the world's gold sitting under the care of men so serene they might as well be monks. A quirky tidbit. Some records suggest that during slow trading seasons, accountants would hold quiet competitions. Who could balance scales with the fewest adjustments, or write entire pages of numbers without blotting the ink. Winners earned not wealth, but small carved charms said to bring steady hands. You could almost call it the world's first office wellness program. One older man gestures for you to come closer. His face is lined like folded parchment, his eyes patient but amused. He picks up a few grains of gold dust with the tip of a knife and lets them fall onto a tiny copper dish. Peace, he says in a soft voice, is when the weight comes out right the first time. You stand there, unsure whether he's talking about the empire or about life in general. Probably both. The governor appears, a tall man wrapped in robes the color of storm clouds. His hands are clean, his expression mild. He moves from scribe to scribe, murmuring instructions in a voice barely louder than the wind. This is how policy is made here, not by decree shouted from balconies, but by quiet corrections whispered over ink. You can almost hear the empire breathing in sync with its rulers. Sometimes, of course, mistakes happen. When a clerk miscalculates or a trader cheats the scales, the punishment isn't a whip or jail. It's a loss of reputation. Word spreads fast in a world that values trust as currency. One slip, one careless number, and your name loses its balance forever. You take a seat near a low wall, watching the sunlight creep across the courtyard floor. It moves like a sundial, made of gold. The men around you continue their work with almost hypnotic focus. There's something meditative about the way they write. Short strokes, steady rhythm, no hesitation. Each record is a prayer for stability. Outside, the city is waking properly now. You hear distant chants from the mosques, a donkey braying somewhere near the market, a woman laughing as she draws water from a well. Everything folds together in the same tempo. Slow, steady, deliberate. You begin to realize that the Mali Empire's strength lies not in its gold itself, but in how its people feel about gold. It isn't greed, it's reverence. Gold represents balance, fairness, and divine order. The empire's peace is rooted in a shared agreement that the world works best when everyone measures their portion carefully and leaves a little weight for someone else. As the morning deepens, you watch one of the younger scribes make a small mistake. He notices it instantly, sighs, and calmly starts again. No one mocks him. No one rushes him. The patience in the air feels contagious, and you start to understand how an empire could grow so vast without constant war. When everyone counts the same way, there's less reason to fight. A soft wind stirs the reed canopy, scattering a little dust over the ledgers. The governor closes his own book and looks up at you. The empire is like a scale, he says. Gold in one bowl, people in the other. If you add too much to either, everything falls. And then he smiles, a small, knowing smile that somehow contains the weight of centuries and returns to his writing. You sit a while longer, listening to the soft rhythm of pens scratching, the sigh of balanced breath, and think, maybe history's most peaceful empires weren't built by warriors at all, but by people who simply knew when to stop counting. The sun is higher now, flattening the shadows into gold-tinted outlines that shimmer across the market walls. The air tastes faintly metallic, dry, heated, but not unpleasant. You wander toward a narrow lane where the real magic of the Mali economy unfolds, the art of counting without coins. It's a strangely intimate act, this trading of dust. There are no heavy chests, no shiny coins clinking in bags. Instead, there are pouches, small, stitched from goat leather, supple with use, darkened by the sweat of countless palms. Each pouch holds gold dust, weighed and trusted, never sealed. Everyone can peek, everyone can measure, but no one steals. Not because of guards, there are few, but because trust is more valuable than the dust itself. You watch as two men meet beneath a shade awning made from palm fronds. One carries a sack of salt, white as bone. The other holds his gold pouch. There are no scales between them, just a small wooden spoon and decades of practice. The man with the salt sprinkles a few grains into the other's hand, and the other answers by pouring a small stream of gold dust into a folded leaf. Both nod. The exchange is over. It looks almost too easy. But every gesture carries centuries of training in balance, rhythm, and fairness. Mali's wealth depended not on vaults, but on memory, on everyone remembering the invisible agreements that kept the empire's arteries unclogged. Historians still argue whether Mali's dust economy was a pragmatic response to the lack of minted coins or a deliberate act of cultural independence. Some think coinage would have made corruption easier. Others argue it was simply impractical in the desert. The truth, as usual, probably lies somewhere in the middle, like a scale waiting for its weights. A mainstream fact. Throughout the Mali Empire, gold dust was indeed the standard currency, measured with tiny scales or spoons called mithqal. These tools were so precise that traders could balance them by feel alone. Some scales were family heirlooms, passed down like sacred relics. To inherit one meant inheriting a reputation for honesty. A quirky tidbit. Travelers from North Africa once wrote about how Malians would dust their hands with gold as a sign of prosperity, literally rubbing the powder between their palms before greeting visitors. Imagine shaking someone's hand and coming away sparkling like a disco ball. It wasn't vanity, it was diplomacy. A gentle way of saying, "We are doing well, and we wish the same for you." As you move deeper into the marketplace, the rhythm of counting becomes hypnotic. The scales creak, gold dust trickles, voices murmur. No one shouts prices here. Everything is communicated through glances, small nods, the lifting of fingers. Trade is theater, performed in whispers. You approach a young woman sitting behind a low table covered in pouches. Her eyes are sharp, her hands quicker than logic. She measures gold dust into a little brass cup, taps it twice, then pours it back with perfect precision. You ask quietly how she learned. She shrugs. "Same way I learned to breathe," she says, "by listening." You watch her for a while. Her fingers move like a musician's, each motion exact and graceful. Around her, children chase each other. A camel groans. Someone starts to play a soft tune. on a reed flute. The melody mingles with the hush of trade, turning the scene into a kind of slow dance between music and math. You realize something. This isn't just an economy. It's choreography. Every act of weighing and pouring, every knot of agreement, fits into a collective rhythm that keeps the empire alive. Gold dust might change hands, but harmony is what circulates. As noon approaches, the heat presses down like an invisible hand. Merchants pull thin cloths over their faces, eyes half closed, movements slower but still precise. A faint breeze stirs the dust, sending tiny gold sparks swirling through the air. For a moment, the entire market seems to shimmer in suspension, frozen between sunlight and shadow. You find shade beneath a wall and sit beside a local man polishing his weighing spoons. "You can't rush gold," he murmurs, without looking up. "If you do, it punishes you." He holds one of the spoons up to the light, inspecting the curve. It doesn't like impatience. He smiles faintly, and you can't tell if he's joking. But maybe he's right. Everything here, trade, politics, even conversation, flows at the pace of gold dust. Too fast, and you lose it to the wind. A caravan rolls into town by afternoon, bells jingling softly. The air fills with the smell of camel sweat and dates. Traders greet them without excitement, just measured respect. The newcomers unroll bundles of cloth, salt, and copper. The locals bring forward their gold pouches. The great machine of balance starts turning again, quiet and tireless. In the midst of it all, you catch sight of a small wooden box. Inside, resting like relics, are tiny brass weights, some shaped like seeds, others like animals. Each one represents a specific value of gold dust. The merchant explains that some shapes carry moral meaning: the lion for honesty, the fish for adaptability, the bird for freedom. The weights, he says, remind everyone that value is more than metal. It's behavior. The sun dips low, staining the market in amber light. Gold and sand become indistinguishable. You close your eyes and listen to the whisper of trade, the sigh of balanced scales, the rustle of dust against skin. You can almost feel the empire's pulse in your fingertips, steady, patient, eternal. Somewhere, a scholar might later write about primitive economies, but if he stood here long enough, he'd understand. This isn't primitive. It's perfection, disguised as simplicity. When you open your eyes again, the merchants are packing up, tucking their gold pouches under robes. No locks, no chains, just quiet trust walking home beneath the evening glow. You brush a little dust from your sleeve. It glitters in the dying light. For a fleeting second, you can't tell whether it's gold or just the reflection of a civilization that learned to live by balance. And maybe that's the real treasure after all. The next morning, you wake to the gentle murmur of Niani, the capital of the Mali Empire. It isn't grand in the way you might imagine an imperial city. There are no marble palaces, no towering fortresses casting long shadows over trembling peasants. Instead, Niani feels like a deep breath held between sunrise and order. Clay houses cluster along the riverbank, their walls painted in the soft red of wet earth, and from every doorway comes the low hum of conversation, calm as the river itself. This is the city of the courteous clerks, the quiet bureaucrats who keep the empire's golden blood flowing. You see them everywhere, men in long robes, pens tucked behind their ears, walking in pairs as if conversation itself were a form of governance. They greet one another with hand to heart, bow slightly, and then continue murmuring in tones so measured you could almost mistake them for prayer. Here, power doesn't shout, it whispers. The office of the Imperial Treasury isn't much to look at. A broad hall with open windows, piles of ledgers stacked neatly on woven mats, and a smell that's half ink, half date syrup. Inside, scribes work cross-legged on the floor, each with a small writing board, a reed pen, and a sense of quiet dignity. You step inside and instantly feel your own heartbeat slow to match the rhythm of scratching pens. One clerk looks up and smiles faintly. "Welcome," he says, "but please, lower your voice. The numbers don't like noise." You nod, and he returns to his work. Historians still argue whether Niani's bureaucratic culture was born from necessity or temperament. Some claim it was the result of a deliberate royal decree, Mansa Musa's attempt to impose calm as a form of order. Others believe it emerged organically, a cultural reflex in a land where storms were rare, but sandstorms constant. Better to speak softly than risk stirring the dust. Either way, the result was a city where administration looked more like meditation, a mainstream historical fact. Niani truly was a major administrative hub, the beating heart of Mali's political system. It housed scribes, governors, and treasurers who recorded trade, taxation, and royal decrees with astonishing precision. Reports suggest the empire's bureaucracy was so efficient that caravans could cross thousands of kilometers with documents guaranteeing safe passage, an early paper-based form of insurance. A quirky tidbit. Some chroniclers mention that Niani's scribes kept tiny bowls of water beside them as they worked, not for drinking, but for calming the ink. They would occasionally dip a finger into the water and flick a droplet onto the parchment to cool the words, especially when recording large sums of gold. Superstition? Maybe, but you can't help admiring the poetry of it. You sit quietly, watching as the clerks debate over a figure. There's no raised voice, no accusation, just soft logic exchanged like warm tea. One scribe points to a line in his ledger, the other adjusts his turban thoughtfully, nods, and makes a small correction. A third man chuckles, barely audibly, at the mistake. "The numbers," he murmurs, "are patient teachers." Nearby, a woman enters with a basket of reed pens. Her name is Salima, and though she's technically a supplier, everyone greets her with the same respect as a minister. She examines each pen carefully, tests it on a scrap of parchment, and lays it in front of the scribes like offering candles at an altar. "A dull pen ruins peace," she says. "Sharp ones save kingdoms." You linger in the hall, trying to absorb the rhythm of it all, the steady scraping of pens, the occasional rustle of parchment, the creak of a wooden beam as the wind shifts outside. It's the sound of stability, unremarkable and unforgettable at once. Later, you follow one of the clerks, a man named Haroun, out to the courtyard for midday tea. He pours slowly from a kettle blackened by years of use, lifting it high so the stream cools as it falls. "Gold is loud," he says suddenly. "That's why we must be quiet. Too much noise, and it forgets who it belongs to." He smiles, offering you a small cup of sweet mint tea that tastes faintly of copper and calm. Historians might call this superstition, but in a place like this, it's philosophy disguised as etiquette. The clerks of Niani understand something the rest of the world often forgets. That peace isn't kept by armies or laws, but by people who know how to speak gently when surrounded by wealth. The afternoon heat builds slowly, pressing against the clay walls until everything smells like baked dust and patience. Haroun invites you into a side room where young apprentices practice arithmetic. There's no shouting, no frantic energy, just the sound of fingers tapping on low tables as they count small stones, arranging them in rows. We count to learn peace, their instructor tells you, not profit. You think of your own world again, its spreadsheets, its deadlines, its caffeinated panic, and feel a strange ache for this slower math. As dusk approaches, the scribes close their ledgers, rolling the parchment gently, like they're putting a child to bed. One man takes a small brush and sweeps the floor before leaving, as if even stray dust must be kept in balance. Outside, the sky melts from orange to indigo, and the call to prayer floats softly through the city like a sigh. You realize something then. The Mali Empire wasn't peaceful because it was powerful. It was powerful because it was peaceful. Every record kept, every line balanced, every conversation spoken softly. It all added up to an empire that understood restraint better than expansion. Haroun locks the treasury door, pats it twice for good luck, and looks up at the stars beginning to appear over the river. The universe, he says, is just another ledger. We are only trying to keep it balanced. You stand beside him, listening to the frogs begin their nighttime chorus, and think, perhaps this is what civilization truly sounds like. Not the roar of conquest, but the hush of numbers falling into place. The next day begins not with fanfare, but with a whisper. A reed door slides open. The light sneaks into the treasury hall of Niani in thin, respectful lines, as though even dawn understands this is sacred space. The smell of fresh ink and palm oil drifts in the air. One by one, the clerks of Mali take their places, like monks returning to morning prayer. You follow them in, trying to tread quietly, because here even your footsteps might interrupt the arithmetic of peace. They sit in pairs, their knees touching the edges of low tables, writing boards resting across their laps. The sound that fills the room isn't chatter or authority. It's the hush of calculation. Pens dipping, sand shifting, paper sighing. The empire's memory is being recorded, grain by grain, in ledgers of sand and silence. Historians still argue whether the Mali Empire's record-keeping was inherited from older Ghanaian systems or developed independently through the empire's Islamic scholars. Either way, the method was meticulous. The clerks didn't write in bound books like Europeans would centuries later. They wrote on sheets of bark paper, or sometimes on cured animal skin, using soot ink mixed with gum and honey. Durable, simple, honest. Each record begins the same way, a line naming the town, a date traced by moon phase, and then columns of goods, salt, gold dust, cloth, millet, cattle. Occasionally, a scribe adds a note like, the trader sneezed twice during counting, as if to prove the gods were watching too. A mainstream historical fact. Archaeologists and historians agree that Mali's bureaucracy maintained intricate tax records and trade accounts, often using Arabic script. The empire's literacy rate among administrators was remarkably high for the 14th century. Letters from Timbuktu's archives still exist, written in ink so steady it looks fresh centuries later. A quirky tidbit. Some scribe sprinkled fine sand over wet ink to dry it faster, then brushed it off gently before rolling the document. The sand, touched with gold dust from the air, sometimes left faint sparkling trails on the parchment. Those tiny glints weren't decoration. They were accidents of beauty. You sit near a young clerk who's writing out a shipment record. His lips move as he murmurs the words to himself. 4 sacks of salt, 6 bundles of indigo, 12 gourds of oil, 1 old camel with bad knees. He pauses, scratches out the camel's description, and replaces it with a more diplomatic note. 1 camel, modest. You smirk, and he notices. Even camels deserve dignity, he whispers, grinning. You realize that these ledgers aren't cold documents, they're alive. Every line carries warmth, humor, and human error. This isn't sterile math, it's storytelling in ink. As you look around, you notice the way sunlight catches on the gold scales set in one corner. Each beam seems to bend toward the instruments, glinting off their tiny brass arms. The chief treasurer adjusts one delicately, checking balance. The scale, he says softly, is our Koran of commerce. It's not blasphemy, it's reverence. The rhythm of the day continues, slow and methodical. From time to time, a scribe pauses to blow gently across his parchment or sip water from a clay cup. Outside, the wind hums through the palm leaves. Inside, the empire hums through the pens. Then, a small commotion. One ledger page has gone missing. It's not war, but for these clerks it might as well be. The youngest apprentice, pale with guilt, stands frozen as the others search. No one yells. They simply begin tracing steps backward, following the path of yesterday's calculations like detectives of calm. Within minutes, they find the missing page folded neatly beneath an ink pot. The chief scribe lifts it, inspects it, and nods once. It wished to rest, he says dryly. Laughter ripples through the hall like wind across grass. You realize this is their way. Discipline without cruelty, order without fear. At midday, the clerks take a break. They close their ledgers and stretch their legs in the courtyard. Someone brings bowls of millet porridge. Another starts a quiet game of worry, moving stones on a wooden board carved with small cups. Every move is calculated, every gesture deliberate. Even play here feels like practice for patience. Harun, your friend from the day before, sits beside you. He nods toward the ledgers inside. Each mark, he says, is a promise to tomorrow. We write so others don't have to remember too much. You ask if he ever worries about mistakes. He smiles. Always. But that's why we write in silence. The quieter we are, the fewer errors sneak in. Historians might scoff at this logic, but you can feel the truth of it. There's something profoundly human about believing that noise corrupts numbers, that peace keeps ledgers clean. As the sun leans west, the scribes file back inside. The last light of day pours through the high window and lands on the golden scales, igniting them for one brief, holy second. Harun raises his pen, touches it to the page, and begins to write again. You imagine the scene continuing long after you leave, the ledgers filling with patient handwriting, the scales tipping and righting themselves, the empire's wealth measured not in conquest, but in care. Outside the river hums, the frogs begin their early song, and somewhere a trader counts his last handful of dust before sleep. Molly's piece continues to ripple outward, recorded in bark, sealed in silence. And as you step out into the fading light, you realize some of history's loudest empires are forgotten. But this one, quiet, careful, golden, still hums between the pages. Night falls softly over Niani. The air smells faintly of wood smoke and river reeds. You find yourself walking along the outer wall of the city, where the guards keep a slow and steady patrol. Their spears glint like dull stars beneath the moonlight. It's quiet, so quiet that even the insects seem to hum in time with the rhythm of the Empire's sleep. You reach the edge of the treasury courtyard again. Inside, the gold scales have been covered with a linen cloth, as though they too deserve rest. You sit nearby, feeling the hum of a world that values stillness over spectacle. Far away beyond the river and dunes, another caravan is on its way. You can almost see it in your mind's eye. A line of camels like moving punctuation marks, guided by men wrapped in indigo cloth. Their bells ring faintly in the dark, each note like a heartbeat of the desert. A mainstream fact. Caravans crossing the Sahara during Mali's height could include up to 1,000 camels at once. Some traders journeyed for months between the salt mines of Taghaza and the markets of Timbuktu. Gold, salt, ivory, slaves, and cloth. Each exchange fueled the empire's pulse, slow but unstoppable. But here's the quiet truth, the one not written in most textbooks. These journeys weren't driven by greed. Many traders moved in rhythm with prayer times, resting at dawn, breaking for evening calls to worship. They saw commerce not as chaos, but as devotion through order. Every measured grain of gold dust was a prayer of precision. You picture a lone merchant pausing under the stars. He unties his pouch, scoops a pinch of gold dust onto a cloth, and watches it shimmer under the moon. Not to count it, not to boast, just to marvel. He whispers to himself, "The dust of kings," and ties it shut again. You can almost hear the hiss of his breath as he exhales, the kind that comes when someone feels small and infinite all at once. Back in Niani, a scholar from Timbuktu sits by lamplight in his study, copying lines from a treatise on geometry. His name might have been Al-Hassan or Musa or Ahmad. You'll never know. What matters is that he believes the same thing as the merchant, as the clerk, as the treasurer, that precision is a form of peace. He dips his pen, draws a perfect circle, and mutters, "Even the heavens count by measure." His candle gutters. He shields it with his hand and keeps writing. This, you realize, is the empire of measured wealth. Not an empire of battles or banners, but of balance. Its cities hum with trade, its ledgers sing with sand and ink, its scholars chase the quiet beauty of accuracy. And yet, beneath that calm surface, human nature still stirs. You overhear a low argument outside the scholar's window, two merchants disputing the weight of a trade. "Your dust is damp," one insists. "Your measure is small," replies the other. The words could become violence, but then a third voice intervenes, older and patient. It's the treasurer himself, Harun's superior. "Come," he says, "we'll weigh it again together." He carries a small lamp and the empire's portable scales. In its light, their faces soften. The grains of gold fall slowly, like a trickle of sunlight captured in motion. The balance steadies. Both men exhale. "Fair," says one. "Fair," agrees the other. And just like that, the night continues, unbroken. A quirky historical note. It's said that in Mali, traders preferred to weigh gold dust at night under oil lamps, because the softer light revealed the true gleam of purity. In harsh daylight, even pure gold could seem dull, leading to needless suspicion, By lamp glow, they said, fairness was easier to see. You watch as they tie their pouches closed again, sealing them with knots so intricate that only their owners could undo them without breaking the cord. The treasurer smiles faintly. Gold, he murmurs, is lighter than peace, but harder to keep. When he leaves, you follow him through the quiet alleys. The night market has closed. The smell of roasted millet lingers. Cats prowl along walls, their eyes catching lamplight like twin coins. Somewhere, a flute plays a slow, wavering tune. You pass by a courtyard where children sleep on mats, and one of them dreams aloud, murmuring about a camel with golden feet. You smile. Maybe in a way he's dreaming of the empire itself. You lie down near the edge of the river, where reeds whisper and frogs sing. You feel the same calm that has shaped this place for centuries, a calm so strong it might outlast the empire itself. And as you drift toward sleep, your last thought is not of kings or wars or riches. It's of a simple truth whispered by merchants, clerks, and scholars alike. What is measured with care endures. What is counted in haste disappears. Somewhere far away the caravan bells fade into silence, and the world breathes evenly once again. The dawn finds you halfway between dreams and daylight, the river glinting like liquid gold in the first sun. Somewhere in the distance, a muezzin's call winds through the air, soft and drawn out, almost a sigh. You stretch and watch the mist curl above the water, carrying with it stories, old, heavy, and shining. Because somewhere along those same river banks, the quiet rhythm of counting is about to collide with a world far louder and larger than Molly ever imagined. You've heard whispers of it before, the pilgrimage, Mansa Musa's legendary journey to Mecca. But today you'll walk the golden path beside him, just to see how one man's devotion and generosity reshaped economies from Cairo to Constantinople. Picture it, year 1324. The emperor sets out from Niani with a caravan so vast that even the griots struggle to describe it. Tens of thousands of people, camels laden with gold, servants carrying silk, food, and gifts enough to sustain an army of pilgrims. You can almost hear the creak of saddles, the rustle of woven baskets, and the low hum of anticipation. A mainstream fact. Mansa Musa's pilgrimage to Mecca was so extravagant that it caused inflation in Egypt lasting more than a decade. Chroniclers recorded that he spent, or gave away, so much gold in Cairo that its value plummeted across the Mediterranean world. Gold became as common as brass, at least for a while. And yet, when you picture Musa himself, he's not a boastful man. You see him riding slowly on a tall camel, robes white as dawn, face calm as moonlight. He doesn't speak much. He doesn't need to. Around him, attendants carry fans, parasols, and scrolls filled with names of those owed gifts. He gives freely, gold to beggars, endowments to scholars, donations to mosques. But the giving is deliberate, ceremonial, quiet. When someone tries to praise him aloud, he just raises a hand and murmurs, "Gold is only sand that the Creator painted bright." You can almost feel the tension in Cairo when his caravan arrives. The city buzzes, markets trembling, traders shouting, money changers dizzy. For the first time, the world's richest man walks its streets. But he looks at them like someone observing a reflection rather than a kingdom. A quirky tidbit. Local storytellers claim Musa's entourage included singers who composed lullabies for his camels, so they would walk more smoothly. Another claimed his cooks used honey from the Niger Valley to sweeten every dish on the road, even porridge for the guards. Historians, of course, still argue whether any of that actually happened. But you like the idea of it. Sweet porridge diplomacy. At the heart of the chaos, though, there's a problem. Musa's generosity overwhelms the balance. Cairo's money-lenders panic. Traders hoard gold, fearing its fall in value. And you, standing among the crowd, can feel the irony soaking through the air like desert heat. Peaceful wealth turned disruptive by sheer abundance. That's the strange thing about peace. It's delicate. One generous gesture can ripple through entire continents, like tossing a single pebble into a pond of markets and kings. You follow Musa as he moves through the city's maze of alleys and bazaars. The walls gleam with fresh plaster. The smell of cardamom, incense, and roasted lamb clings to your skin. Every step he takes leaves a small stir behind, a merchant recalculating, a beggar grinning, a noble frowning. Later that evening, under the glow of oil lamps, he meets with Egyptian scholars and jurists. Their Arabic is polished, his softer, slower, tinged with the rhythms of Manding speech. But they understand each other perfectly through gestures of respect, through the shared language of quiet authority. One scholar presents him with a manuscript, an old copy of Al-Ghazali's work on balance and justice. Musa touches the cover and nods. Balance, he says simply, is the weight of gold and the weight of mercy. You like that line. It lingers in your mind even as the scene shifts. Days pass. The caravan leaves Cairo, heading east toward Mecca. Gold dust still swirls in the air behind them like a trail of fireflies. And though his pilgrimage is an act of faith, it also becomes a story of unintended consequence. Historians still debate whether Musa truly understood the financial chaos he caused or whether he cared. But in this quiet retelling, you sense that he did. Because when he returns home years later, he starts building mosques, libraries, schools. He channels that unbalanced wealth into order again, turning glitter back into knowledge. You stand in Niani as his ships come back up the river, their hulls lighter than when they left. There's no parade, no shouting, just clerks at the dockside, scribes marking inventory, and one aging emperor walking through the crowd with his head bowed. You follow him through the palace gates. The courtyard seems smaller now, quieter, as though time itself has slowed to match his step. In his treasury, the scales gleam once more, untouched but ready. He pauses before them, takes off his rings, and sets them gently on the table. "Let others count," he murmurs. "I'll build." And so he does. Mosques rise across Gao and Timbuktu. Scholars arrive from Granada, Cairo, and Fez. Trade resumes, not with noise, but with rhythm. It's as if the empire exhales, steadying itself after a long-held breath. The same clerks you met before return to their ledgers. The same couriers carry messages sealed in wax. The same gold dust, once scattered across the Mediterranean, now trickles home through merchants' careful hands. And when the last lamp in the treasury goes out that night, you can almost hear a voice in the dark, somewhere between a prayer and a sigh. Gold travels fast. Wisdom takes its time. Outside, the stars shimmer like grains of dust suspended in ink-black air. You can't help smiling. Maybe peace, too, is something to be counted, slowly, carefully, grain by grain. The dawn after Mansa Musa's return feels strangely familiar. You're back among the sand-swept winds and caravan trails, following the same soft rhythm that's guided Mali's trade for centuries. The empire hums again, not loudly, not urgently, but like a steady drumbeat beneath the sun. You ride alongside a caravan leaving from Timbuktu, headed north. The camels groan softly, their shadows stretching long and thin across the dunes. Their feet press into the sand with that slow, patient grace you can only learn from walking the desert 1,000 times. Every few steps, the bells around their necks give off a low chime, one for each breath, one for each heartbeat of the empire. A mainstream fact. The trans-Saharan trade routes linked Mali to the Mediterranean world. Gold flowed north. Salt, cloth, and horses came south. The Sahara wasn't a barrier. It was a highway of silence. Entire cities like Walata and Tagaza existed solely to serve these caravans. Salt was so precious that slabs of it were exchanged for gold by weight. One merchant's joke said, "Salt is gold that sweats." But here in the desert, there's no shouting, no bargaining chaos. Trade happens like a ceremony. Two groups meet at dusk, spread out their goods on woven mats, and wait. No words, no haggling. The buyers examine, the sellers observe. When both sides are satisfied, they bow and retreat. The desert's wind carries the agreement away, sealed not by ink, but by trust. Historians still argue whether these silent trades actually existed as described. Some claim they were symbolic stories meant to glorify Mali's fairness. But whether literal or legend, the idea endures. An empire so peaceful it could negotiate in silence. You sit near the trading site that evening, sipping bitter tea, brewed with water hauled from miles away. Around you, the merchants are quiet. No one talks much. A few smile at you politely, nodding. They pour another cup, sweetened this time, and pass it along. You drink, the warmth spreading through your chest, chasing away the chill of the desert night. Someone hums an old caravan song. No words, just a slow, circular melody. The stars above shimmer like spilled gold dust. The air smells faintly of salt and camel hide, of travel and endurance. One trader, his face wrapped in indigo cloth, leans toward you. "You think we trade gold for salt," he says, voice low. "But really, we trade loneliness for company." You look at him, surprised. He smiles faintly and gestures at the dunes. "The desert takes from us," he continues, "but it gives us each other." You watch as another group of traders arrives, leading camels weighed down with white slabs of salt. The exchange begins. The air feels thick with ceremony. A woman wearing bright orange cloth arranges her scales, iron weights worn smooth by use. The grains of gold dust glimmer faintly under her lamp. Every scoop, every tilt of her wrist feels almost like prayer. A quirky fact: some merchants rubbed their scales with shea butter before use, believing it brought accuracy and favor from the spirits of trade. Others claimed that whispering the name of a good ancestor while weighing dust ensured a fair exchange. It's strange how faith and mathematics blend seamlessly here, like tea and sugar dissolving into one. You feel it, too, that perfect calm that lives between numbers and belief. As dawn nears, the trading ends. The desert begins to shift colors from black to gray to gold. You help pack the mats, roll the tents, and load the camels. Someone hands you a strip of dried dates and a piece of salted fish. It's tough but comforting, flavored with a life of repetition. You march with them for hours, the horizon never changing. The sand crunches beneath your feet in rhythm with the camel's steps. Every so often, someone calls out a prayer or hums a tune to break the silence. The air grows hotter, shimmering. Ahead, the caravan leader lifts his hand, signaling a stop. You're at a small oasis, a clutch of palm trees and a pool no larger than a courtyard well. The camels kneel, grateful. Water splashes, laughter ripples through the camp. There's peace in the way everyone moves, unhurried and synchronized. One person fetches water, another gathers firewood, a third kneads dough. No one orders, no one commands. It's as if the entire caravan is one living body. You realize that this too is politics, the quiet politics of survival and cooperation. Out here, power isn't in titles or armies. It's in how many people will help you when the wind turns cruel. Later that night, as the campfire burns low, you hear a soft argument between two young traders. One says Mali's gold will last forever. The other shakes his head. Gold stays, he says, but empires don't. The older men nearby chuckle. They've heard that debate for decades. You tilt your head back, staring at the stars. Maybe he's right. Empires fade. Roads drift beneath the dunes. But some things, like this calm, this way of weighing, trading, trusting, survive in quieter forms. Somewhere, a storyteller begins reciting a tale in slow, rhythmic Bambara. The story of a man who traded away his voice for the ability to listen to the desert's secrets. You don't understand every word, but you feel its meaning. By the time he finishes, the fire has turned to embers. The last thing you see before sleep is the faint glimmer of gold dust on someone's fingers, catching the moonlight like a secret never quite told aloud. Tomorrow, you'll follow the traders north toward Tahaza. But for now, you let the silence of the dunes cradle you, warm and endless. The stars seem to lean closer, as if they too are listening. The caravan moves on at dawn. The dunes shimmer in pale gold, and the air smells of dust, leather, and mint tea left cooling in clay cups. You're no longer a traveler, but a listener, an unseen witness carried along by the soft rhythm of hooves and sand. Somewhere ahead, the business of the empire changes hands, not through conquest, but through courtesy. By midday, you reach a fortified oasis where the air hums with restrained diplomacy. This is where Mali's ambassadors meet their northern counterparts, Berber merchants, Andalusian traders, emissaries from distant sultanates. Yet there are no banners, no trumpets, no fanfare. Just a shaded courtyard, low cushions, and the faint sound of wind moving through date palms. Here, politics happens in whispers and gestures. Every bow, every pause, every sip of tea is deliberate. You sit in the background watching it unfold like choreography. A mainstream fact. The Mali Empire maintained diplomatic and trade relations with the Mamluk Sultanate, the Hafsid Kingdom of Tunis, and even Morocco. Mali's ambassadors were famed for their composure and subtlety. Many carried gifts instead of threats. Reports from Arab chroniclers mention their elegance, their precision, their habit of listening more than they spoke. Across the table, a Moroccan envoy unwraps a bundle of silk, revealing a carved wooden box filled with salt bars, white and heavy. The Malian envoy responds by placing a leather pouch on the mat between them. Neither speaks. The exchange is wordless. The Moroccan finally breaks the silence. "We trust your scales." The Malian nods. "And we trust your roads." It's done. The agreement is sealed not in ink, but in courtesy. You can't help smiling. You've sat through modern meetings that feel louder and accomplish less. Here, deals worth thousands of dinars unfold through 2 sentences and a shared pot of mint tea. One of the local scribes, noticing your curiosity, leans over. In our tongue, he whispers, we call this the diplomacy of silence. To speak too quickly is to spend wealth too fast. You jot that down in your mind. Spend words slowly. A quirky historical tidbit. Some accounts claim that Malian diplomats trained in schools that taught not just languages and scripture, but the art of stillness. How to hold a respectful pause long enough that others feel obliged to fill it. In those silences, they often won entire negotiations. Historians still argue whether such training really existed, or if it was just an idealized tale told by travelers impressed by Malian restraint. But it fits, doesn't it? The empire of measured wealth would, of course, teach the measure of speech. Later that afternoon, the negotiations move indoors. The heat presses against the walls, and fans made of ostrich feathers swish slowly. The Malian ambassador, an older man named Kadi Amadu, gestures for everyone to sit. His robe is simple compared to his guests, dyed brown, the color of river mud. But his voice carries like flowing water. You cannot hold gold in a closed fist, he says softly. It slips through. So must peace. The others listen, some nodding, others frowning slightly at the poetry. But Kadi Amadu doesn't press. He pours more tea, adding just enough sugar for sweetness, and lets the room breathe. One of the Berbers leans back, clearly testing him. And if someone closes their fist anyway? Amadu smiles faintly. Then, he says, we weigh again. You can almost feel the ripple of quiet amusement in the room. Even the guards at the doorway relax. The mood lightens, the tension dissolves. Outside, a boy hums while polishing the silver teapot. He's probably no older than 12, but he already knows more about diplomacy than most generals ever will. He's learning that peace begins with tone, not decree. When the meeting ends, the diplomats part with formal bows. No signatures, no seals, just mutual memory. And somehow, you know that's enough. The desert will remember. That evening, you wander through the small settlement attached to the oasis. Merchants laugh, women sell honey and woven baskets. Children chase each other between the tents. The diplomats who were so composed earlier now sit together by a fire, eating roasted lamb and telling jokes. One of them spots you lingering nearby and waves you over. Sit, he says. If you've listened to our silences, you've earned our stories. You do. You sit on the sand, the heat of the day fading beneath you. They tell tales of journeys across endless dunes, of lost caravans found by starlight, of deals struck with laughter instead of swords. Then someone, a scribe with ink-stained fingers, begins a softer story. He speaks of a time when Mali's ambassadors met the emissaries of Egypt and debated the worth of gold versus wisdom. One side argued that wealth could buy peace, the other that knowledge could create it. The debate ended when a young page poured water into both cups of tea and said, "They taste the same when shared." The diplomats laugh at the tale, though one shakes his head. Historians still argue whether that one really happened, he mutters, smiling. As the fire dims, you notice how easily laughter replaces formality here. Even the most cautious envoys relax in the company of warmth, music, and food. Maybe this is the real diplomacy, the moment after the meeting when people stop guarding their words. Before bed, Katie Amadu finds you again. He hands you a folded scrap of parchment. On it, he's written a single line in Arabic and Manding side by side. Peace is the silence between two breaths. He nods to you, then disappears into his tent. You lie down beneath the stars, the paper resting over your heart. The dunes around you seem to breathe, slow, rhythmic, endless. And you realize that Mali's strength was never its armies or gold mines. It was its ability to listen, to weigh words the way it weighed dust. Somewhere, the faint sound of drums rolls over the horizon. Not war drums, just the pulse of the empire's heartbeat, still steady, still counting. Morning light seeps into the curtains of the royal compound like liquid gold. You're back in Niani, the capital of the Mali Empire, though it feels subtly different now, more intricate, more human. The treasury courtyard is busier than before. Scales glint, scribes murmur over ledgers, and the faint scent of shea butter and ink fills the air. But today, your focus drifts somewhere else, to the figures often left in the background of history's grand accounts. The women, the quiet stewards of balance, the keepers of numbers, the whisperers behind decisions. You follow the rhythm of footsteps along a shaded veranda, where three women sit cross-legged beside a long wooden table. They're surrounded by scrolls, wax tablets, and pouches of gold dust, each sealed with a symbol too elegant to be merely decorative. A mainstream fact: women in the Mali Empire could hold considerable authority. Many served as advisors, property holders, merchants, and even officials in the royal court. Chronicles mention royal sisters and mothers who influenced political and economic decisions, often through counsel rather than decree. The eldest of the three adjusts her headscarf and glances at you briefly, her eyes sharp as glass. "If you're here to watch the gold counters," she says dryly, "you'll have to start counting yourself." You nod and she smiles, just a little. Good. Then count quietly. Her name is Sogolan Dara, one of the court's female accountants. Her fingers move like dancers over the scales, weighing gold dust with an ease that seems both mathematical and spiritual. Next to her, another woman records figures in Arabic numerals, murmuring as she writes. The third, younger than the others, hums softly, a melody that keeps the rhythm of the weighing steady. It's mesmerizing to watch. The sound of the small bronze weights clinking, the soft rustle of parchment, the almost musical precision of it all. A quirky fact: some scholars believe the term Jeli Muso, female griot, extended beyond storytelling to include women who sang the ledgers. They turned trade records into rhythmic recitations, using melody to memorize transactions before writing them down. You can almost hear that now in the younger woman's tune, a harmony between art and arithmetic. Sogolan looks up from her scales. "You think gold makes power," she says quietly. "But we know the truth. Gold makes memory. Men spend it. We remember where it went. That one hits you like a proverb carved in stone." In the far corner, another woman enters, a royal attendant carrying a sealed jar of imported ink. Behind her, a guard bows deeply before a tall figure in a simple blue robe. The room stills. It's the Mansa's sister, a woman of high standing and quiet authority. Her name, someone whispers, is Niare Conte. She is known for her composure, her intellect, and her uncanny ability to resolve disputes between ministers without ever raising her voice. She sits down at the table, folds her hands, and says, Tell me, Sogolon, how much gold left for the scholars of Sankore this moon? Sogolon answers instantly, without looking at a single scroll. 77 measures, sealed with the wax of Jenne. The Mansa's sister nods. And how much returns? 72, Sogolon replies. 5 still in transit. 3 stolen or lost. The air goes still. Then Nyarlathotep simply exhales. Stolen by whom? No names yet, only absence. Historians still argue whether women like Nyarlathotep held true political authority or operated purely as intermediaries. But as you watch her lean forward, speaking with that calm, razor-edged tone, you have no doubt. This is power, not in spectacle, but in stillness. She turns to you suddenly. You, she says, you've been listening long enough. What would you do if gold went missing? You blink. Count again, you manage to say. She smiles faintly. Exactly. Truth is never lost. It's only miscounted. Her attendants exchange looks. Someone hides a grin. You can tell this is her way, turning lessons into conversation. Later, as the sun slides westward, the accountants gather for their mid-afternoon break. They sit together in the courtyard, eating roasted millet cakes dipped in honey, trading stories. One laughs so hard she nearly spills her tea. It's disarming to see the empire's keepers of wealth, barefoot and giggling under the palm trees. Sogolon notices you again. You see, she says, power isn't loud. It laughs quietly and gets back to work. You nod, and she presses a tiny weight into your hand, no larger than a pebble. A reminder, she says, to always measure twice before you believe once. You pocket it carefully. The bronze feels warm, heavy with meaning. As evening draws in, you find yourself walking with Nyarlathotep through the palace gardens. Fireflies blink between the reeds, and the distant sound of drumming drifts from the lower quarters. She walks slowly, as if listening to every sound, every rustle of wind. Men count the gold, she says. We count the silences. It's the silences that tell the truth of an empire. You want to ask what she means, but she's already turning back toward the palace, her robe whispering against the stone path. Later, you sit by the river with the accountants, their day's work done. They're rinsing gold dust from the folds of their sleeves, washing their hands in water that glows orange in the sunset. The gold flecks drift downstream, tiny sparks of light fading into darkness. You imagine them traveling miles away, into the fields and the sea, glittering briefly before sinking, like the quiet influence of these women, scattered through time, but never truly gone. You think about Sogolon's words again. Men spend it. We remember where it went. Maybe that's the real accounting of history, not who held the gold, but who knew its story. And as the last of the light melts into the river, you realize the Mali Empire's peace didn't just come from scales and scribes. It came from balance, the kind that can't be written down, only lived quietly, day after day. Night descends on Niani like a velvet cloak, soft, slow, and scented with smoke. You lie beneath a woven awning near the palace courtyard, listening to the layered sounds of empire at rest. The call of a distant night bird, the crackle of torches, the faint laughter of guards trading stories to stay awake. For the first time, you feel the stillness of wealth. It's not silence born from emptiness, but from satisfaction. The pause of a people who know the measure of what they've earned and what they owe. In the distance, a river shimmers beneath the moonlight. That's the Niger, lifeline of Mali, winding like liquid glass through the plains. Tomorrow, you're told, you'll follow its curve north to see something even greater than gold or empire, Timbuktu itself. But for now, you drift toward sleep. Lulled by the soft rhythm of drums and the low murmur of traders counting quietly in their dreams. Morning comes bright and warm, the air alive with the promise of travel. A caravan waits beyond the city gates, dozens of camels kneeling in the dust, their saddles draped in patterned cloth. You climb onto one, guided by a young man named Musa Kone, a trader's apprentice whose enthusiasm radiates like sunlight. "First time heading north?" he asks, adjusting the leather strap around a crate of salt slabs. You nod. He grins. "Then keep your eyes open. The desert teaches faster than any scholar." You set off as the sun climbs higher. The sound of hooves, the steady creak of saddles, the rhythmic swish of tails, each becomes part of a hypnotic pulse that carries you out of the city and into the vast amber wilderness. As the caravan moves, stories unfold like maps. Musa tells you how salt, not gold, was the true heartbeat of Mali's trade. In a world where salt preserved life, food, meat, even memory, it was called white gold. Gold buys luxuries, he says, but salt buys tomorrow. The desert stretches endless before you, a landscape of motionless dunes and shimmering heat. Every horizon seems to hum with invisible sound. You remember the words of the Mansa's sister. Men count the gold. We count the silences. Here, silence has weight. By the third day, you reach an oasis, a shallow lake rimmed by date palms and acacia trees. The caravan halts, camels kneeling in relief as the traders drink deeply and fill their water skins. You walk to the edge of the lake, where an old man sits beneath a palm, grinding something with a stone pestle. His white robe is faded, but his eyes are bright. "Traveler," he greets you without looking up. "You come from the city of gold." You nod. He gestures toward the shimmering dunes. "And yet, you chase dust." You hesitate. "Dust?" He smiles. "Gold dust, salt dust, road dust. All the same. The trick is to know which kind to keep." You laugh softly, but his tone is not mocking. It's serene, like someone who's already had the conversation 100 times. He sprinkles the powder into a bowl of water, stirring until it forms a cloudy paste. "This," he says, "is what the desert gives: salt and silence. Both can preserve or destroy, depending on how you use them." The traders nearby begin to unload their goods: cloth from Gao, beads from Africa, spices from across the sea. The air fills with the scent of camel sweat, coriander, and earth baked hot by the sun. Musa calls you over to help weigh the salt blocks. Each one glints white as bone, marked with a red wax seal. "From Tahaza," he says proudly, "pure as it gets." You lift one block. It's heavier than it looks. Musa notices your struggle and laughs. That's the thing about salt. It carries its own burden. It's honest. No one counterfeits salt. A small truth, but it feels profound. That evening, the caravan gathers around the fire. Flames lick the air, casting faces and shifting gold and shadow. Someone plays a wooden flute. Another hums along. The night is alive, yet still. A storyteller begins, an old woman wrapped in a patterned shawl, her hair silver beneath the starlight. She speaks of Sundiata Keita, Mali's first great king, whose mother was mocked for her deformity, but who bore a son of strength and destiny. Her voice is low and rhythmic, carrying the tale like a spell through the dunes. Even the camels seem to listen. She tells of battles fought with wisdom, not rage, of kingdoms united not by conquest, but by promise, of how Sundiata's victory was not measured in gold, but in justice. When she finishes, the air is thick with awe. No one speaks for a moment. Then Musa whispers, "She's a jelly Muso, a griot woman." You look again at the storyteller, realizing she is both memory and music, a living library. In this land, history isn't carved in stone or locked in scrolls. It's sung, passed from tongue to tongue, generation to generation, glowing like an ember that never fades. Later that night, as you lie beneath a sky so vast it seems to breathe, you think of all the kinds of wealth you've seen. Gold that gleams, salt that sustains, stories that remember. The Mali Empire was built on all three, and it's the last one, the living word, that feels most enduring. You close your eyes, hearing the woman's voice echo one last time. To forget is to be poor. To remember is to reign. And as sleep takes you, you sense the caravan stirring again, preparing to cross into the endless sea of sand, toward a city that exists half in memory, half in mirage. Timbuktu awaits. You wake to a new kind of silence, the desert kind. No rustling palms, no croaking frogs, no city hum. Only the dry whisper of wind dragging sand across sand. You sit up and see the horizon painted in liquid gold. The sun has just begun to rise, spilling warmth into the dunes like melted copper. The caravan is already stirring. Camels grunt, traders murmur their morning prayers, and the smell of cardamom tea cuts through the cool air. Musa hands you a small wooden cup, steam curling up into your face. "Drink," he says. "You'll need the strength. Timbuktu's still 2 days away." You take a sip. The tea is sweet and bitter at once, much like the empire itself. You watch as the traders load the camels, each bundle carefully weighed, measured, and tied. Even out here, far from the gold counters of Niani, the habit of precision endures. That's the thing about the Mali Empire. It doesn't conquer by the sword. It conquers by order, by the belief that everything has a weight, a worth, and a rightful place in the balance of the world. As the caravan moves forward, the dunes shift underfoot, whispering in soft sighs. The desert seems endless, but it's not empty. If you listen closely, you can hear stories in the wind. By midday, heat waves shimmer like ghosts on the horizon. Musa rides beside you, pointing toward distant stone markers half buried in the sand. "Graves of travelers," he says quietly. "They say the desert keeps what it's given." You glance at the small cairns, each just a pile of rocks, but together they trace the ancient arteries of trade. Somewhere beneath the sand lie dreams, debts, maybe even gold pouches never opened. Historians still argue whether the Mali Empire maintained patrols along these routes or simply trusted local tribes to guard them. What's certain is that few caravans vanished entirely. The network of alliances was as intricate as any ledger, woven through kinship, faith, and mutual need. Musa tosses you a date from his pouch. Eat. The desert respects those who share. You do, and the sweetness jolts your senses awake again. By evening, the dunes give way to low scrub and stony plains. The wind changes. It smells faintly of clay, wood smoke, and something else, books. It takes you a moment to realize what that scent means. Somewhere ahead lies Timbuktu, the city of scholars, where parchment and gold dust share equal reverence. You crest a rise and finally see it. low mud-brick buildings glowing ochre in the dying sun. Towers capped with wooden spikes that point at the sky like questions. A river of traders, camels, and pilgrims winds toward its gates. You almost laugh in disbelief. After so many miles of silence, Timbuktu hums like a hive, softly, rhythmically, purposefully. "Welcome," Musa says, grinning, "to the place where gold thinks it's wisdom." Inside the city, the streets are narrow and winding, shaded by latticed awnings. You pass scribes hunched over scrolls, children running errands with ink-stained fingers, and merchants weighing not just goods, but words. Here bargaining sounds more like poetry than business, a mainstream historical fact. Timbuktu, at its height in the 14th and 15th centuries, held one of the largest collections of manuscripts in the world, on astronomy, medicine, law, and philosophy. Its libraries rivaled anything in Europe. Scholars came from as far as Cairo, Fez, and even Venice to study there. But the quirky part? Paper was so rare that it was treated like silk. Some scribes wrote in margins, erased with sand, and reused pages multiple times. They joked that paper was worth more than wives. A dangerous joke, you suspect, but one they told anyway. You stop at a courtyard where a teacher, a tall man in indigo robes, is reading aloud to his students. His voice is deep and calm. "To weigh gold," he says, "you use scales. To weigh wisdom, you use time." The students nod solemnly, their styluses scratching softly across palm leaves. You sit quietly at the edge, feeling something strange, a mix of reverence and rest. This place hums with measured peace, the same rhythm that pulses through the empire's trade, its rituals, its nights. Every act here, writing, buying, teaching, is a form of counting. Later, Musa brings you to a small market square where gold dust is exchanged for books. One trader offers a manuscript of Arabic poetry in exchange for a pouch of dust. The negotiation is wordless. Both men weigh, nod, smile. You watch the gold dust spill across the scale, tiny grains that gleam like starlight caught in motion. You remember Harun's steady hands, the Mansa's amused smile, the Queen's quiet wisdom. Somehow, all of them are here too, in spirit. You ask Musa if he'll trade his own gold for a book. He shrugs. "Maybe someday. For now, I'm still learning how to read." Then he grins. "But I can count perfectly." You laugh. The sound feels good after so much sand. As dusk deepens, you wander toward the Sankor Mosque, its walls glowing red in the sunset. Birds wheel above it, tracing spirals against the sky. Inside, scholars chant softly, their voices weaving through the air like threads of incense. You stand at the threshold, hesitant to enter. And then, almost without meaning to, you whisper, "To measure the world first, you must measure yourself." It's a line you once heard in Niani from a scribe half asleep at his desk. But here it feels true. The air grows cooler, the stars emerge, and somewhere in the city a bell rings. The day is over, and another tally has been made, not in gold or trade, but in moments. You close your eyes, and the thought settles over you like a soft blanket. The empire's peace was never about stillness. It was about motion done carefully, like counting gold dust in the dark and never spilling a grain. And as sleep comes, you think you hear the desert itself whispering back, "Keep counting, little dreamer, but count slowly." By dawn, Timbuktu hums awake again, quietly but confidently, like a scholar stretching before opening a scroll. You rise with the city's rhythm, wandering through its alleys while the air still holds the cool trace of night. Everywhere you see balance at work, merchants laying out their scales with slow precision, students sweeping courtyards before lessons begin, women carrying baskets of millet and papyrus. The light slants through the narrow lanes, painting gold lines on the dust. You pass a group of apprentices arguing, gently, about whether wealth comes from knowledge or patience. You don't interrupt. You already know the answer. Somewhere nearby, a rooster crows and a door creaks open. The scent of roasted coffee beans curls through the morning air, mingled with the dry tang of parchment and ink. Musa finds you there, still half asleep, smiling as he hands you a small clay cup. "You'll want this," he says. "Scholars in this city debate before breakfast." You take a sip. The coffee is strong enough to raise the dead, or at least the truly drowsy. He laughs at your expression. "They say the best traders come here to learn how to argue without shouting. Maybe that's why Mali's still peaceful. Everyone's too busy talking in circles." You follow Musa through the heart of the market district, where stalls sell everything from paper to prayer beads to gold dust packed in tiny leather purses. The air is alive with murmurs and metallic clinks. You pause to watch a transaction unfold. A trader pours dust from one pouch into another, using a spoon carved from ivory. The scales sway, then settle perfectly. "Fair?" he asks. "Fair," his partner replies. A simple exchange, but it's a ritual centuries old. This is the empire's quiet genius, the idea that fairness itself is a kind of wealth, a mainstream historical fact. Mali's economy thrived for centuries because of this stability. The empire's gold reserves were so vast that when Mansa Musa made his famous pilgrimage to Mecca, he distributed so much gold along the way that its value temporarily dropped across Egypt and Arabia. Historians still argue whether his generosity was religious devotion, political theater, or just poor budgeting, but either way, it became legend. And here's the quirky part. Some say Musa's entourage was so enormous that he brought hundreds of servants carrying staffs tipped with gold and camels laden with silk. A few even claim his caravan stretched as far as the eye could see, glittering like a mirage. You can't help imagining it now. The desert blazing under sun, dunes flashing gold as far as the horizon. No wonder tales of Mali grew to mythic proportions in Europe. To outsiders, this was the land where gold grew like grass. But to those who lived here, it was simply home, a place where even wealth had to behave itself. By midday, you visit one of the great manuscript libraries. The keeper, an elderly man with soft hands and eyes clouded by age, welcomes you with a bow. He unrolls a scroll so delicate it rustles like dry leaves. "These are the true treasures of Mali," he murmurs, gesturing at the rows of bound volumes. "Gold will fade, but ink remembers." He lets you touch a page, a slow, reverent gesture. The parchment is warm from the sun, the script elegant and looping. Margins are filled with notes from long-dead students, corrections, jokes, arguments. You can almost hear their voices still whispering between the lines. The keeper smiles faintly. Every counter of gold dust should copy one verse of wisdom just to balance the scales. You tell him that sounds fair. He chuckles. "In Mali, everything must balance, even our foolishness." That evening, you sit atop the roof of a scholar's house, looking out over the city. The sunset spreads across the horizon like spilled saffron. You can see the river glinting far to the south, the dunes stretching pale in the fading light. Musa joins you, carrying 2 small bowls of rice and lentils. "You know," he says between bites, "most travelers think Timbuktu is where the world ends." He gestures toward the horizon. "But it's not. It's where the counting begins again." You nod. You understand now. The empire's peace doesn't come from its walls or soldiers. It comes from this rhythm of exchange, this endless cycle of give and weigh, learn and teach, count and recount. Historians still debate what held the Mali Empire together, whether it was faith, trade, or sheer geography. But watching the city breathe below you, you realize the truth might be simpler. It was discipline, the quiet belief that even beauty should have rules. A cool wind rises from the north. The first stars appear, tiny shimmering points that seem to wink in approval. Musa finishes his meal, stretches, and says softly, "Tomorrow we visit the scribes' market. It's where ideas are traded like gold." You smile. "And what if I have no ideas to sell?" He grins. "Then you listen." Listening is worth more anyway. The city below hums on, measured, balanced, peaceful. You feel yourself growing sleepy, your heartbeat sinking with the slow pulse of the empire around you. And as the stars multiply across the desert sky, you think of every counter, every trader, every scholar who's ever weighed something precious under this same moon. The thought lulls you toward rest, because in Mali, even dreams are counted gently, 1 grain of gold dust at a time. Morning returns like a golden echo. You wake to the slow clang of a bell from the Sankor Mosque and the faint hum of scholars reciting verses in unison. The air feels different today, lighter somehow, as though the whole city has exhaled in contentment overnight. Musa is already waiting at the base of the stairs, his satchel slung over one shoulder. "Ready for the scribes' market?" he asks, flashing that familiar grin. You follow him through winding streets bathed in early sunlight. Everywhere you turn, the city is alive with quiet purpose. Gold counters at their stalls, scholars dipping pens in ink, children balancing baskets of papyrus on their heads. Even the camels seem to move at the same measured pace, as if they too understand the rhythm of this empire's heartbeat. When you reach the market square, it's not noise that greets you, it's whispering. Dozens of scribes sit cross-legged before stacks of parchment, murmuring lines to themselves while they write. The sound is hypnotic, like rain on soft sand. You realize you're standing in a marketplace where no one shouts, where value isn't measured in weight or shine, but in words. Musa points toward a stall draped in indigo cloth. "That one," he says, "sells contracts, blessings, and love letters, all at different prices." You laugh, and he shrugs. In Mali, even affection comes with a receipt. A young scribe waves you over. He has a neat beard and a smile that feels like sunshine. "Traveler," he greets you, "would you like to immortalize a thought?" You hesitate. "Immortalize?" He nods. "A few words written by a steady hand can outlive even gold." You hand him a single dinar. "Then write this: the most peaceful empire is the one that never raises its voice." He bows slightly, then begins to write. His strokes are fluid, deliberate, each letter a tiny act of devotion. When he finishes, he fans the parchment gently, then seals it with a touch of sand. "May your words travel farther than you do." You take the parchment, tucking it carefully into your sleeve. It feels heavier than its weight, a reminder that words, like gold dust, are currency if treated with care. Around you, traders negotiate, scholars debate, and poets perform under the shade of woven awnings. One old man stands on a wooden crate, reciting verses about justice. Each stanza ends the same way. The scale must never tilt too far, for peace begins where balance lies. His audience nods, murmuring approval. Some toss coins at his feet, others a handful of grain. Historians still argue whether Mali's rulers consciously shaped their society around ideas of measured justice, or if it simply grew that way from habit. But to you, walking these streets, it feels natural, inevitable even, like the empire itself was born knowing the weight of fairness. A quirky fact: some merchants in Timbuktu used to employ professional measure witnesses, people hired to stand by and watch every trade, ensuring accuracy. These witnesses were paid not in gold, but in salt or dates, the things everyone truly needed. The idea was simple. If fairness feeds the body, it feeds the soul. You can't help smiling at that. Even bureaucracy here feels poetic. As the afternoon heat builds, you and Musa rest in the shade near the mosque's outer wall. The air ripples with warmth. Your skin smells faintly of dust and ink. Musa pulls out a folded sheet, a deed of trade, signed and stamped. "Today," he says proudly, "I became a partner." You raise an eyebrow. "A partner in what?" He laughs. "In everything that moves. Salt, cloth, books, dreams." Then more softly he adds, "The old men say Mali's peace doesn't come from kings. It comes from agreements like this, from people who keep their word even when no one's watching." You nod, understanding. Here, promises aren't written in stone. They're written in rhythm. Evening drifts in on the back of a slow wind from the desert. The light turns bronze, and the city glows. From a rooftop nearby, the muezzin's call ripples outward, wrapping the streets in a warm, echoing hush. You and Musa sit quietly, watching the shadows lengthen across the market. Gold dust catches the last sunlight as traders seal their pouches, the glow turning their hands to amber. You think about everything you've seen since entering the empire. The steady treasurers in Niani, the caravans moving across sand, the scholars weighing ink like gold, the storytellers balancing truth and myth. Every part of Mali speaks the same language, careful, measured, patient, and yet you sense change ahead. The empire's peace, though vast, feels fragile, like a perfectly balanced scale that could tilt with one careless hand. Historians still argue what ended Mali's golden age. Some blame the rise of new trade routes, others internal rivalry. But sitting here now, you wonder if it was something simpler. The eternal law that even balance shifts eventually. Musa sighs, following your gaze. "Empires fade," he says, "but not the lessons they teach." You look at him, startled by the quiet wisdom in his tone. "And what lesson is that?" He smiles faintly. "That peace isn't the absence of noise, it's the art of counting softly." The line lodges deep in your mind. As darkness falls and the first stars blink into being, you find yourself repeating it under your breath, almost like a prayer, counting softly. You watch the city settle for the night, the last merchants covering their scales, the scribes rolling their scrolls, the wind scattering a few stray grains of gold dust into the air. They drift upward, glowing faintly, like captured moonlight. And for a moment, you imagine they'll stay there forever. Tiny reminders of an empire that once believed even silence had value. if measured with care. You sit once more beneath the carved beams of the mansa's great hall, the air still shimmering faintly with the smell of incense and hot wax. The courtiers have withdrawn to the edges, murmuring in the polite half-sleep of long deliberations. Before you lies a single gold scale, so small it could rest upon your palm like a sleeping bird. It is the same tool used by generations of counters before you, an unbroken chain of balance and patience. You tilt it slightly, watching as a grain of dust drifts to one pan and then another. It settles perfectly. In that tiny equilibrium, you can feel the heartbeat of the empire itself, its laws, its merchants, its rulers. Not the clash of armies, not the roar of conquest, but the soft hush of numbers quietly aligning. The Mali Empire was never just about wealth. It was about the idea of order, the promise that even something as fleeting as gold dust could hold a world together if weighed with honesty. Outside, the city exhales. You can almost hear the traders folding their tents, the call to prayer floating from a distant minaret, the laughter of children racing home through narrow alleys of red clay. Somewhere, a scribe dips his reed pen in ink and writes another ledger of who owes what to whom. The work never stops, but neither does the rhythm of peace that pulses beneath it. You think about those who came before you, the quiet counters who measured fortune, the merchants who trusted their touch, the kings who slept soundly, knowing their empire's wealth rested in honest hands. Historians still debate whether this system truly reflected equality or merely disguised control, whether Mali's bureaucracy was enlightenment or gentle tyranny. But here, in the silence of the final tally, such arguments fade into the hum of history. You reach for the leather pouch once more, feeling the dust between your fingers. It glitters faintly, catching the last candlelight. You remember the saying from Timbuktu's clerks, "Gold speaks softly, but everyone listens." You smile. It's true. Every empire has its sound. Rome had the clash of bronze, Egypt the whisper of reeds, and Mali the faint chime of balanced scales. The candles burn low now. The air grows cooler, softer. The rhythmic scratching of pens fades one by one as scribes pack their tools and leave for home. You alone remain, listening to the night settle into the bones of the city. Even the gold itself seems to breathe slower, its glow mellowing to match your own. You imagine the desert stretching beyond the city walls, dunes glimmering under the moonlight like scattered coins. Somewhere beyond, caravans crawl toward the horizon, their camels swaying gently beneath bundles of salt cloth and stories. Everything moves slowly, predictably, nothing in haste, and that perhaps is the truest kind of peace. The empire's gold counters have always known this secret. Power does not lie in shouting the loudest or hoarding the most. It lives in the balance, in the quiet moment between weight and trust. You lean back, eyes half closed. The last flame trembles, folds inward, and fades. Now the night presses softly around you. The room has grown darker. The noises of the city melted into a low, steady hum, like the desert wind breathing against the walls. Your body sinks deeper into the bed, muscles loosening one by one, as if each exhale carries away a little more of the day's weight. Imagine the scales again, resting perfectly balanced before you. One pan holds all your unfinished tasks, your worries, the tiny miscounts of the day. The other holds calm, patience, stillness. With each breath, the lighter side wins a little more ground, until the balance tips completely toward peace. The gold dust glows faintly in the candle's ghost light, tiny suns fading into sleep. You trace their shimmer behind your eyelids, each speck drifting away like a thought you no longer need to keep. You remember the long roads of Mali, the markets, the scholars, the soft discipline of measured wealth. You remember that every empire, no matter how rich, how grand, eventually dissolves into silence, but in that silence, something remains. The echo of careful hands, the quiet wisdom of those who counted without greed. So rest now. Let the scales settle. Let the desert ones carry your thoughts far beyond the walls. You are the counter of your own calm tonight, and every grain of sleep is perfectly weighed.